Welcome to an exploration of one of the most renowned pieces of biblical poetry, Psalm 6. This passage, part of the Book of Psalms in the Old Testament, holds a special place in the hearts of many spiritual seekers. It is one of the 7 penitential psalms, which were traditionally used for prayers of repentance in both Jewish and Christian traditions. Written by David, it is a cry for mercy, a plea for relief from distress, and a profound expression of faith in God's healing power. Psalm 6 opens with David's plea to God, "O Lord, rebuke me not in thine anger, neither chasten me in thy hot displeasure." Here, David acknowledges his sinfulness and seeks God's mercy, not his wrath. He recognizes that God's anger is justified, but pleads for compassion instead. In the second verse, David continues his plea, saying, "Have mercy upon me, O Lord, for I am weak. O Lord, heal me, for my bones are vexed." This verse reveals David's physical and spiritual suffering. His plea for mercy moves from the general to the specific, highlighting his physical ailments as a metaphor for his spiritual distress. Verse 3 sees David questioning God, "But you, O Lord, how long?" This represents his feeling of abandonment, his despair at God's apparent silence in his suffering. It's a raw and human moment that many spiritual seekers can relate to. In verse 4, David appeals to God's loving kindness, saying, "Return, O Lord, deliver my soul. O save me for thy mercy's sake." Here, David is not only asking for relief from his suffering, but also for the reaffirmation of God's presence and love in his life. In verses 5 and 6, David speaks of his sorrow and weariness. He says, "I am weary with my groaning, all the night make I my bed to swim, I water my couch with my tears." Here, David expresses the depth of his despair, using vivid imagery to convey his emotional state. Finally, in verse 7, David declares his faith in God's deliverance, saying, "The Lord hath heard the voice of my weeping." This verse offers a note of hope and assurance, asserting that God hears and responds to our cries for help. In summarizing, Psalm 6 offers a raw and profoundly human portrayal of suffering, repentance, and faith. It begins with an acknowledgement of sin and a plea for mercy, then moves into a vivid depiction of physical and emotional distress. Despite his suffering, David ends on a note of hope and assurance, asserting that God hears and responds to our cries for help. This message of hope in the midst of despair is what makes Psalm 6 such a powerful and relatable passage for spiritual seekers.